All right, folks, welcome back to the Exit Interview, a podcast for Black educators. It's me, Dr. Asia. So excited for season 5, our first episode, and I have a guest host today, Stacey Taylor Brandon. Stacey, what's going on?
Hey Asia, I'm just so excited to be here. I'm a big fan of Dr. Shawn Ginwright. I think I've given his book out and talked about him so much that I was excited that you reached out to me to be here after being on the podcast twice. I'm excited to be back too.
Yeah, and I know that anyone who listens to the podcast has heard me talk about Stacey and all of her work, and so I just said I had to bring her on to come co-host today. Before we get into talking to Dr. Jenright, I want to read his bio. Dr. Shawn Ginwright is a Jerome T. Murphy Professor of Practice at Harvard Graduate School of Education. His groundbreaking work on trauma, healing, and the empowerment of African American youth has earned him a reputation as an innovator, provocateur, and thought leader in the field of education. Dr. Ginwright's research has been instrumental in reshaping the discourse surrounding youth development. His introduction of the concept of healing centered engagement in 2018 has revolutionized the field, providing an asset based approach to addressing youth trauma and fostering resilience. His work has been cited in the New York Times, and he is a highly sought after speaker on topics ranging from civic engagement and youth activism to the transformative power of healing. Dr. Jenwright's contribution extends beyond his academic work. He is a seasoned nonprofit leader, serving as the co-founder and chief executive officer of Flourish Agenda Inc., a research lab and consulting firm dedicated to unlocking the power of healing and empowering youth of color, as well as adult allies, to drive transformative change in their schools and communities. In recognition of his exceptional research and dedication to urban youth, he was awarded the prestigious Fulbright Senior Specialist Award from the U.S. State Department in 2011. A notable author, Dr. Ginwright has written numerous highly acclaimed books, including The Four Pivots, Reimagining Justice, Reimagining Ourselves, Hope and Healing in Urban Education, How Urban Activists and Teachers Are Reclaiming Matters of the Heart, Black Youth Rising, Activism and Radical Healing in Urban America, and Black in School, Afrocentric Reform, Urban Youth, and the Promise of Hip Hop Culture. Additionally, because there's more, folks. Additionally,
Yes.
he has co edited the influential volume Beyond Resistance, Youth Activism, and Community Change New Democratic Possibilities for Practice and Policy for America's Youth. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Jen Wright.
I need to add. So, thank you. I'm glad to be here, Dr. Asia, Dr. Stacy. But more importantly, I'm a father of two beautiful children that are out in the world
Yes.
living their
Yes.
destiny. I'm a husband of 30 years to an extraordinary
Amen.
woman. I'm a community member. I'm an obedient servant. So I should put that stuff in there too. So all that other stuff is work, but the stuff that really matters is it needs to be in there. But thank you. It's good to be here.
Yes, so happy. So we're just going to jump in it. Go for it, Stacy.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Jen Wright. And I wish I was a doctor. That may be in my path in the future, but thank you
You can
anyway.
call me
It's
Sean. My mama
okay.
didn't name me Dr. Jim. My mama named me Sean. So
Right
Okay.
on.
It's hard. Well, it's hard for me to call you Sean. One of my friends calls you Brother Jen Wright because she believes she knows you. But
oh,
Sean,
okay. All right.
when
That'll
she's
work.
talking about your work. But Sean, thank you for really emphasizing, what really matters, your children, your wife of 30 years, all of those things, a community servant, all those things that are important in our community. But one of the things that we just wanted to start out with the four pivots, phenomenal. Mine is here, it's weathered, it's highlighted, all of those things, but it really introduces powerful shifts in perspective. For individual and collective transformation. The first one you really talk about is that shift or the pivot from lens to mirror, emphasizing self reflection, which is so hard for many of us to take a
Yeah.
look at ourselves first. How, here at the Black educator, at the Black exit interview, Dr. Asia really talks about this idea of racial battle fatigue, and you talk about it in your book as racial weathering. So, how can Black educators use self reflection as a tool for healing from racial weathering and racial battle fatigue?
Yeah, no, great question.
Mhm.
I really wrote the book for myself, right? Because I was
Wow.
involved with a lot of work, working in Black communities,
Mm,
organizing, and I was really brought up in the school of thought that justice is what you do outside, right? It is what you do to other people, other
mm,
institutions. Justice is what you accomplish from the actions you take in the world. And a series of things occurred in my own life where it made me do some deep reflection about my own fatigue, man, about my
mm.
own. I write about hope, but shit, sometimes I get hopeless, right? When I see
Yeah.
the
That's real.
conditions that young people have to navigate in our communities. So, I really kind of wrote the book to say, like, if I had these tools, right, I think I'd be better off. And so,
Mm,
specifically to your question, I mean, I think, um, racial battle fatigue is a real condition, experienced every day. We all experience it. But I think what reflection does is it gives us a sanctuary of space to ask ourselves what's really important
mm,
at this point, right? Um, there's a way in which sometimes, I think of this idea of racial battle fatigue is in the way that I was sort of trained is you grind through it, you battle, you fight,
yeah.
you resist, you resist race, white supremacy at every front all the time, else you just retreat, right? And I think that's important. I'm not suggesting that we should not confront white supremacy in our lives. But what self-reflection allows us to do is ask ourselves, can I sit here and enjoy my daughter's soccer game right now?
Wow. Hmm.
Can I sit here with my partner and watch this movie and
Mm.
enjoy it right now? Y'all know what I'm talking about? Like,
Yeah.
so,
Yes.
so
Right.
reflection gives us that space and gives us the permission, right? To take the spaces that we need to then get back into the battle, right? So there's a way in which I was trained is that you don't have retreat, and we know that from all kinds of battle metaphors that you have to actually have a space of retreat, a space of reflection, um, and so the mirror work allows us to kind of do that introspection.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what am I most afraid of? What is my greatest aspiration? What do I hope for in my life? Most of the time, generally our self-reflection is self-reflection that's not um, it's not nurturing, right? So we might
Oh,
self-reflect on what do I need to change about myself? What did I
yeah.
do wrong? Or damn, I should have said that when she said that racial thing to me. Y'all know what I'm
Yes.
talking about? You
Yes,
know, that
exactly.
like, oh, I wish I would have said that, right? That's the kind of self-reflection we generally that's not sustainable, right? But
Wow.
self-reflection that's questions about what brings us meaning, what brings us joy, what brings us hope, what makes us laugh. Like that's part of this whole ecosystem of justice. And so this is a long answer to that question, but I
This
think
is perfect.
self-reflection gives us the permission and the sanctuary space we need to address this idea of racial weathering uh, in hopes of transforming it, right? So yeah, I mean, I could go on, but I think that's a really good question, and hopefully, folks can sort of make sense about what that looks like in their lives and in their work.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was powerful.
Yeah.
Wow. Go ahead, Asian. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you're saying that because I do think that what I think maybe some folks, and I'll speak for myself in the past, have been afraid of when I sat down and reflected and it wasn't tearing myself down was, and now what? And being
Mm-hmm.
afraid to answer that question of, you know what you need to do, right? You know what's the now what. And if I'm constantly moving, constantly joining some organization, signing up for a committee, I don't have to reflect and sit in and figure out the things that I need to do for my own health and wellness, right? And for the support of my family and community in this way that is going to bring me to a place of being like mentally well, right, and physically well in some cases. So I'm glad that you said that, because that is really true. I've heard so many folks, especially we talk about to Black educators, Stacey and I, all the time. We're
Hmm.
just saying like I shoulda, we shoulda, coulda, and that's just never helpful. So I'm glad you said that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Um, I think, and feel free, to talk as much as you want, because the community needs to hear what you have to say. So
Yes.
please do not pause your wisdom on our behalf.
Hmm.
So I think that, many of the folks that I interview on this podcast are Black, they're former Black educators who've left the field of teaching.
Yeah.
And a lot of them have been pushed out for different reasons.
Right.
And so my question, like many Black educators face systemic oppression that forces them to choose between sacrificing for their students, right? Like being, especially in the Denver
Yeah.
metro area and the mountain states, we're the only one a lot of
Hmm.
times. In Colorado, there's less than 1,000 Black teachers,
Yeah.
right? And so we're asked to choose between sacrificing for our students and being the only one there for them, and rest. And so I think the
Right.
question I'm asking is, how does your work suggest we reconcile these pressures to ensure holistic wellness and community healing while also supporting our Black students, or students, period?
Oof.
Mm.
Oof.
Right.
You don't have to give me
Yes.
another hour to answer that question.
We got some
I
time. If
don't
you
know
got
even
time,
where
we
to.
have time.
Wow. Okay, I got a lot of
Oof.
ways to answer that question, and I think I want to
Yeah.
start with a gendered response to that question because
Okay. Mm.
black women in particular hold the burden of the world, right? That
Oof.
the way in which black women care not only for their families, not only for the communities, not only for black youth, but that burden of care and the way in which black women, I think, are socialized, that it's a gender, it's not equal. Let me just say that. It ain't equal. And I could say that from my experience with my own family, and I could see it get
Mm.
played out. Um, and it has consequences. It
Mm.
has consequences, and those consequences are the mental health consequences for that burden, particularly for black women, are consequences of stress, of anxiety, of physical illness,
Yeah. Say
of
it.
of unfulfilled dreams, because everybody else, everything else come before me. I don't even know what I want, because what I want is to support. Y'all know what I'm talking about, right?
Yes, we
Yeah.
do. Of
Yeah. We.
course.
We.
And so it's gendered. It's gendered, and I think so. That's the one thing I want to say, and I think particularly for Black women, um, they're they're. I think it's important to one recognize that this sort of, and I don't want to call it an addiction to care, because that sort of, it's kind of blaming, but
Mm.
I don't mean to do that. So I don't want to call it an addiction to care, but I want to make sure that folks understand that it's a gendered, it ain't equal for black men or black trans community, right? And so I think one is like, how do you, unfortunately, in my experience, black women recognize it when it's too late.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
when it's too late, and what I mean by that is too late is um, there's a panic attack, there's a hospital visit, there's a I can't, I'm in bed to 2 o'clock in the day because I can't get up, y'all, and so it's too late, right? And so, and I can go over example over example over example. I'm not going to do that in this time, but I think because you understand the point. So I think one is how do we recognize the pattern of care that's unhealthy for us, right? What does that look like? And then secondly, how do we actually strategically and intentionally, and even sometimes selfishly, integrate care for ourselves,
Mm.
Yeah.
right? Like an intentional space. I wish I had more time. I could, because my wife, I could bring her in when she could amen all this and be like, my wife's. I'm gonna just be real with y'all. Like my wife's phrase right now. We've been married
Uh-huh.
30 years. We just celebrated our, and she's classic this addiction to care. Everybody else, right?
Yeah.
Now she's like, she I shouldn't say this on your podcast, but she quotes Cardi B. She says, "I don't cook, I don't clean."
Yes.
But
Yeah.
it is a way of her
Oh,
claiming her space. It's a
yeah.
way of her claiming her own autonomy for her own care, right? So I
Mm,
think secondly, it's like, how do we intentionally make micro diet, create a micro diet of self care for ourselves? What's a micro diet? It could be
yeah.
just 5 minutes. Sometimes we think we got to transform our lives and go to a Buddhist
Mm-hmm.
monastery. I need to get back into church, all of which is good. But what are the micro things we do every day? It's like a diet, right? You just do a little bit every day that ultimately ends up with something more profound. And so I think those two things: one, recognition, like what is going on? Like, do I have this over caring tradition or this addiction to care that I feel that my own caring for others is actually caring for myself? That's one. And then two, if you realize that, then what are your micro diets of care? That do you take a
Hmm.
walk? Do you
Mm,
watch a movie? Do you, whatever it is, that it should be something intentional and regular? Because what that does is it disrupts, right? It disrupts our connection to the unconsciousness, the unconscious addiction to always caring and putting everyone before ourselves, right? So I hope I answered the question, but I think
we did.
those two things help to at least navigate that. Because without it, we just continue to sort of grind away, and then it becomes too late. I have so many students, and the reason I started off with a gendered response is because most of my students that I've had to support in this area are Black and Latino women, Latino women.
I,
Yeah.
I'm so glad you said that. I remember as you were talking, I remember a woman called me. I don't know how she found my phone number. She called me 8 o'clock in the morning one day, and she
Mm,
said,
I
"I found your
remember
number."
this.
Yes, she said, "I
Mm-hmm.
found your phone number on the internet. I listened to your podcast. I've been laying in the bed for 2 weeks, and I was supposed to be at work 2 weeks ago." She says, "I'm a third grade teacher, and I can't get out of bed. I can't go to work." And the school had just started 2 weeks before,
Yeah,
and she's like, "What should I do? What should I do? Should I start a business? Should I do something else?" And I'm like, I think that you need to prioritize like your priorities are kind of mixed up right now. And I said, I think that it's maybe time for you to leave education. And I will never forget this. And to this day, I still cannot believe she said this. She said, "But what about my 600 sick days?"
mm,
And so I asked her, and first of all, I didn't know that you could accumulate that many
mm,
over a time like that. But then I said, "What about 600 well days?
mm-hmm,
Mm,
Like, what does it mean for you to be
mm,
well, right?" And so we finished that conversation, and I went to call her later on to find out what she decided. I think I heard kind of around in community she ended up on FMLA, but we get to that point where we have nothing left to give, and we're still talking about what about a consulting firm? What
yeah,
about starting a nonprofit?
yeah,
And it's like, wait a minute. We're
yes.
still like that addiction to care. I'm so glad you said that. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
yeah. A friend of mine, she says we need to learn. It's such a profound, simple statement. We need to learn how to give from our excess, not our essence.
Mm,
Because if you give from your essence, that's depletable. But if you give from your excess, it calls into question, do I have any excess?
ooh,
Do you
Yeah.
have any excess?
yeah.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's where we need to give from. Give from the extra, not from the essence. And so I thought that was, I mean, she talks about this all the time. But I think it's an important sort of metaphor to think about how we need to navigate some of these issues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, Dr. Jim Wright, Sean, first off, I just want to just give you a shout out for just the gendered response because many times we don't start there. And then just shout out to your wife.
For real.
We also celebrated 30 years this year, and it's not, we are rare, Black love, Black couples making it, especially in this type of line of work, too. So I know that she supports you, but also has her own work. So I don't cook, I don't clean. That's my mantra, too. I didn't realize Cardi
I
B
was going to
said it.
say that. I was
I
going to
can't
say
I
wait
it
to
would.
was your
tell it.
mantra.
It's my mantra too.
That's
I
what's
didn't know
up.
Cardi B said it, but I'm gonna
Hey,
bring it to
Nedra,
my
you ain't
husband.
alone.
Listen,
she
the
is
fact that
she
he
is
said
not
that,
alone.
I heard,
Yes.
I remember Stacey saying that when she retired. She's like, this is, or whatever. I think you had a birthday. You were like, I'm not doing
Yeah.
this no more. And as soon as you said that, Shawn, I was thinking, oh, that's Stacey's motto too.
That's right.
Yes. Right.
That's right.
Right.
Well, it's a
So.
it's a it's a flag in the ground, right? It's not a rejection of anything. It's just like
Mm-mm.
I'm making a decision about
Mhm.
me.
Right.
I'm making a
Right.
decision about me, and that is
Mhm.
what's so beautiful about that is I see my daughter who's looking at my wife and like,
Mm.
hey, like, oh, she's actually can go out with her friends. I could do that. She can see a different mama, right? She can see
Yeah.
a
Yes.
freeness in her mama. She can see her mama
Mhm.
take a nap without guilt, right? And so that's so it's beautiful to see my daughter be able to see that, right? And so anyway,
Mhm.
it's
No, that what you said is so important because I believe your wife and I grew up in the same age group where my mom didn't show that to me. What she showed to me was you get a job in an organization for 30 years and you work and you don't cry about it and you just do it because that's what we do as Black women.
Mm-hmm.
And that almost killed me.
mhm,
So
Mm-hmm.
the fact that your wife is showing another way of being, to be healthy, to live past our, 50, 60 years old, to not be obese, to not be, our health
that's right.
compromised with heart attacks and panic attacks and all those things. Because what you listed at the beginning was my life in the
Yeah.
educational system. I started having those panic attacks. I
Mm,
did show up at the emergency room. My
mm,
husband was with me saying, you cannot go on like this. This is not, you're not dying. And they kept telling me it was stress. And I kept saying, no, it's not. This is not stress. I can take this. But I was dying. So you talked a lot about the things that we can do for ourselves when we do that self-reflection and we do the math, getting the air
mm.
to ourselves. I love that, claiming an autonomy of care for ourselves. Well, what do you see for other leaders in educational spaces? How might they be helpful in applying your principles of the four pivots? Because
Yeah.
literally that book, when I was healing, changed my life, and that's why I'm such a
Mm,
fan.
mm,
Because I had retired and I read that, and I was like, I'm not crazy here. This is
mm.
one of the first healing books for me. But how do you see the four pivots being used by leaders in spaces to advocate for systemic change in schools?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think first, read the book,
Yeah,
right? Right.
absolutely.
I think folks got to read the book, and it's actually really helpful to read it with someone else or a small group of people
Hmm.
to kind of like talk it through because practicing some of the things are hard, right? Around mirror
Yeah.
work and cultivating transformative relationships. Like so, these they're not like you could just read the book and go do it, right? So I hope people read it and talk it and discuss it and try to practice it. So the second thing I think is like it's I think it's important for folks to take like the four pivots diet, right? So what is it that
Mm.
individuals like as a leader, just me, what can I do to begin to integrate some of these practices into my own life, personal life first, not professional. So I tried to not make that sort of my experience in leaders and principals and superintendents that I work with is that it's very rarely their professional lives that are it's a challenge. It's really their personal, and then
Mm.
they bump up against each other, and it's hard to detangle, right? So if you say just do some professional development, the professional development doesn't make you a better human being, but working on your
Right.
human beingness makes you a better professional.
Pause.
Mm.
Pause. Say it again. Say it again for those in the back. One more time, please.
So, so most
Right.
most principals and superintendents and educational leaders believe that professional development will assist them with with their personal lives, their human beingness. But
Yes.
it doesn't work that way. Professional development works with you as the chair that you're sitting in as a professional, but it won't help you be a better human being. But working on yourself as a better human being will allow you
Mm-hmm.
to be a better human being and a better professional. Does that make
Mm-hmm.
sense?
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
so I start there. That's why I shared my story about my personal life, y'all.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not talking about me as a professor and me as a writer. I'm talking about my family because that's
Mm-hmm.
where it starts. So, for leaders, educational leaders, what does this look like in your personal life? How do you work it? Right? What is what is the level of development you have around how many transformative relationships do you have in your own life? How do
Yeah.
you actually practice possibility thinking? So I just locate that personally first, right? Those practices. Then leaders can work on that personally. Then they can ask questions about how that translates into their work. Is it possible that we can actually have some of these practices in our staff meeting? Is it possible that we can actually create systems of support, right? Like you just said, Asia, most systems have, they're focused on when you get broken, then we could fix you. That's how I
Mm-hmm.
see it.
Yes.
When you get
Yes.
broken,
When you
then
get
Mm-hmm.
I can fix,
broken.
then we'll give you some time to fix, sick leave, medical leave, FMLA. It means when stuff ain't right, then we can fix you to get back into the work. And
Mm.
that's a pathological broken system. So we need to have a more asset-based system of support, like you just said, Asia, right? Like we need to have sabbaticals and wellness days and ways to support the workforce that's not just when you get broken. So leaders could think about how the four pivots can help support that. I'm talking with superintendents that are now implementing these sort of. There's this one in actually in Texas. I couldn't believe it because Texas
Mm.
don't
I,
don't really hear about this stuff, but they're in Texas,
right.
and then they piloted these stipends, professional development stipends for teachers to go and learn a wellness practice
Oh
like yoga
wow.
or meditation
Mm.
or whatever it is, and they come back and they train their school on these practices and they get professional development units and they get a stipend to do that. In other words, they're trying to build those systems
Mm-hmm.
of well-being support, right? So I think individually first, then try to figure out what that looks like professionally in your own work setting. And then third, what does that look, how do you actually create systems around the four pivots? How do you actually create language? One of the most important ways that we can use the four pivots in a systems way is evaluating the language that we have in our systems. So if we find ourselves like a common term like disadvantaged youth or you know you know under whatever the language or adjudicated youth that or systems, these are terms that we just take for granted, but they also
Mm-hmm.
signal a really deep perspective about how we view
Mm-hmm.
young people, right? So
Right.
there's different ways that I think is important, but I think in individual first as a personal, like those what those pivots mean to you, how might they be integrated into your leadership, right? In the folks that you work with, and then how do you actually build systems in your own organization and organization and system and institution you're working with?
Yeah, that's
Easier
so
said
very
than done.
good. Yeah, it is. And I think I've always, when I was, Stacy and I are taught in the same district. And I remember we were part of some DEI trainings, and Stacy was actually a part of the
Yeah.
PD team. And I remember this like energy coming back from this professional development, thinking like, if we're gonna do it, this is gonna be amazing. And then folks are like, no, you're gonna go back to your classroom and you're gonna teach and you're gonna be
Mm,
quiet.
Mm.
And right. And so it's the
yeah,
people, they're sent out by districts, paid, the district
Right.
paid for the folks to come. But it's like, how do you make sure that
Mm-hmm.
everyone's on board? And we know, like any other system that education has people who come and go constantly. And so
Yep.
we have to
Mhm.
constantly be doing or reevaluating and rethinking and having conversation and sending folks out. Um, and it's needed. There's no but, and it's needed. And I know that at least in the systems that I work within, there was always something changing. Like, nope, we changed our mind. We don't want to do reading
Yeah.
anymore. It's focus is math. Oh, the CSAP test said we need
Yeah.
to focus on, and the same was kind of done when we talk about equity,
Yep.
diversity,
Yep.
inclusion,
Yeah.
belonging. It's like, oh, that's not working. It's not
Mhm.
happening fast enough. As if human beings aren't a part of it. It's just we forget the humanness as you talked about.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm so glad you said that. So Nor, I had another question I was going to ask, but I think you answered the
Mhm.
question. And one of the questions I was going to ask is about like what educators can do to make change in their school district, but I don't want to ask that question because we need to be sitting down somewhere. We need to be resting, and you made that clear
Mhm.
today. And we talk about that
Yep.
rest and that need for rest in the podcast all the time and in our daily work, Stacey and I. So I think I'll pivot to questions that I ask my other guests. And I think the first question, um, I have two questions. The first question is there a Black educator that you would like to shout out on our podcast
Ooh. Ooh, is there a black
Yes.
educator?
or educators?
Um, yeah, let me think about this. Somebody that I admire, actually, LaShawn Chapman, um, who heads up, she's the CEO of the National Equity Project. Um,
Yes.
uh, yeah, she's just, does an amazing, she's just an amazing sister. She's a friend of mine, but she's not just a friend. Like, I just watch how she moves in the world, and her dedication to supporting black teachers and black education is just. And her husband too is a friend of mine, Chris Chapman,
Mm.
who created an organization, Kingmakers, who works
Mm.
specifically with black young men.
Mhm.
It has a process of taking these young men and into fellowships that really sustain their souls and really allows them to be brilliant. So anyway, both of them together, I'll lump them together, Chris and LaShawn Chapman.
That's awesome.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is
I,
beautiful. I think Misha Mosley works with them with the
Oh
Black
yeah, I
Teacher
know Misha.
Project.
Yeah, I know Misha.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Good people. Last
mhm.
question for you.
Oh, before you get to the last question, let
Go
me
ahead.
say this because I want to just say thank you to the National Equity Project because their work around attending to healing, along with your work and along with Karma, it really is changing the lives of Black educators
Mm,
Yes.
and really the focus on really changing that framework that we had to give and
mm,
give and give, as you said, to excess, essence and excess
hmm.
resonates. But the work that you all are all doing to bring awareness to that self care is not. It's not the buzzword, and it's not
Mm-hmm.
what the white folks are doing. It
Mm-hmm.
really is essential to us as a people to be able to be in spaces of supporting Black youth and other youth. Um, in our world today. I just want to say that
Yeah.
because I know a lot of people that are really studying your work and looking at National Equity Project and just really just supporting the work that y'all are doing to make us healthier because we have to be healthier
Yeah.
Yeah.
and we have to embrace our human beingness.
Yeah.
So I just want to say that before you,
Yeah.
Dr.
No,
Ginwright. Thank
no,
you.
thank you, Stacey. And real quick,
Mhm.
like, this is not new for Black folk,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
No, it's
Like,
not.
Black folk, we have, in the transatlantic slave trade, and when we came
Mhm.
and were brought here, we formed sanctuary spaces. They
We
turned
did.
into churches, they turned into
Mhm.
whatever, but they're sanctuary spaces so that we can affirm our humanity and feel whole and loved,
Mhm.
even in the context of deep, vicious white supremacy and racial oppression. We still did it. We
We
still
did.
did it.
Yeah.
And so it's not
Mhm.
new. Like this thing called healing and self care, it's like it's not a new thing. It's just saying, look,
Nope.
let's not forget what our we are here because our ancestors did this. They did
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
it. They got
Mm-hmm.
together on Saturdays mornings. They got together on Sundays. They lit the candle and did the thing, and they talked and they affirmed each other's humanity. And that was just
Mm-hmm.
enough to get through the next week, right? And so
Yeah.
it's
Amen
just
to that.
it's not like a new thing, right? It is
Mm-hmm.
only saying that we are here as a result of the spiritual deep practices of our ancestors. What do they look like today in this thing?
Mm-hmm.
They don't.
Mm-hmm.
We're not dealing with nothing new.
It's
We are
not new.
still here,
Mm-hmm.
so we just can't forget what got us here. That's all. That's
Mm-hmm.
all I'm trying to say, really.
And that's what you're reminding of us of, because when we get in these systems of oppression and these systems that promote and perpetuate white supremacy, we start to believe that we don't have what it takes to heal
That's
ourselves,
right.
That's
right?
right.
And we forget that we really do. And then we're so caught up in this productivity kind of wheel that we start to get gaslit.
That's
And
right.
so that's why I'm affirming what you all are doing, because it's bringing us back to our roots that we often forget, especially when we're in white dominated spaces, and that promote all of the things that we just are not. So thank you for reminding us that
Yeah.
we have
Thank
it.
you.
We already have what it
I already
takes.
have it. That's right.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, I'll say one last thing.
Hmm.
For you, what does it mean to be well?
Hmm. What does it mean to be well? Uh, it means, I think of well-being and, spiritually, physically, and emotionally, and I'm always sort of navigating those things. What it means for me to be well is to let go of the things that hold me down and strive for the things that lift me up.
Yeah.
I love that.
That's it?
That's
The-
it. That's a lot. But if you
it
Hey.
if
is
you knew me,
actually.
that'd be a lot. Let
Yeah.
go of the things that hold me down. That's people, places, and things.
Uh-huh.
And strive for the things that lift me up. Physically, I exercise, I swim, I run. Those things lift me up. I meditate every morning. I love my children, my family, and my mama. Even though she get on my
Mhm.
nerves sometime, I'm going to see
That's
my
real.
mama and my
Yeah.
family, right? And so those things feed me, right? And so
Hmm.
I try to take an inventory, literally at the end of a week. Like I take an inventory of what are the things that fed me,
Mm.
and then what are the things that drain me.
Mm.
And
Hmm.
if there's things that if the last question, if the things that drain me are too, oh, I gotta let some of them go. I'm sorry. Like I'm gonna just be really honest with y'all. I travel a lot to speak and blah 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 and talk, like, because I love talking about this work, but getting on a plane and traveling to a place, and I'm in a hotel. And so now I'm like, you know what? I'm not traveling as much. I'm not going to do it. It don't feed me. And I love spreading the word, but I don't like traveling that much to do it. Right.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to make clear decisions. Right. Like I love this because I'm at home. Right. And I'm still spreading the word. But they're little things. Right. It's micro diets of decisions every day that
Mm.
we make about what feeds us and strains us. And so I try to keep that list of what feeds me, that keep that bucket full. I try to keep it full.
Hmm.
Can't do it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to keep the other thing, that the bucket, that those things that drain me, I try to keep that one empty, but I can't keep it empty because there's just life, right? But I try to manage both of those.
Thank
Mm.
you. And I hope that our listeners heard that, right? There's so many pieces that Shawn discussed today, the micro diet, all these pieces that we can incorporate immediately to our lives, right? The journaling, the meditation, is so
What
good.
feeds you? What drains you?
Yes.
Brother, my friend got it right. Brother Ginwright.
Brother
Thank you.
Jen, right.
Sister Stacy, Sister
Yeah.
Asia.
Yes. Amen. Yeah. This has been, I feel fed. I'm so excited to finally have had you on the podcast. I know this was
Ooh.
months out in advance, and so happy that you had a chance to stop and chat with us. Just feeling super grateful. Stacey, you have any words?
No, I'm full. I was fed. So thank you. I love it. Anytime a black man shouts out his wife, I'm all for it. So thank you to your wife.
Nedra,
Yes.
you hear that, girl? Come on over here.
And your kids too.
Yes,
So
thank you,
thank
Nedra.
you.
Thanks to the kids.
All right.
All right,
All
so this
right.
has concluded our episode of the Exit Interview, a podcast for Black educators. Thank you all for coming and listening to us. We hope that you listen again. Peace.
Thank y'all so much. Great.
Thank you. Thank you so much.